Bhagavate Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Atha Jagama Bhagavan Radhasah Tumburuhu Pratyutthayaabhivadhayaha Sanujo Abhyacharayan Munim.
While Sanjaya was thus speaking, Sri Narada, the powerful devotee of the Lord, appeared on the scene carrying his tumburu. And Maharaj Yudhishthira and his brothers received him properly by getting up from their seats and offering obeisance.
Text 39. Yudhishthir Uvach Naham Veda Gatim Pitror Bhagavan Tvagata Ambava Hata Putartha Tvagata Cha Tapasvini.
Maharaj Yudhishthira said, O godly personality, I do not know where my two uncles have gone, nor can I find my ascetic aunt who is grief-stricken by the loss of her son.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Ishita is there. If you want to do this verse, and then after that Ishita can join, please.
Okay, Mataji.
Thank you, Mataji.
Text 40. Karnadhara iva pare Bhagavan Paradarshakah Atha babhase Bhagavana Narado Munisattamah.
You are like a captain of a ship in a great ocean, and you can direct us to our destination. Thus, address the godly personality Devarshi Narada, greatest of the philosopher devotees, began to speak.
Ishita, Hare Krishna Ishita, you can continue from verse for text 41, please. Hare Krishna Ishita. Mataji, okay, you can continue. If she joins, I can see her. Ishita?
Okay, Mataji, no problem. You can stop me anytime.
Okay.
Naraduvach Ma Kanchana Sucho Rajan Yad Ishvara Vasham Jagat Loka Sapalayashyemi Vahanti Balim Ishtituhu Sa Samyunakti Bhutani Sa Eva Vinuyakti Cha.
Sri Narada said, O pious king, do not lament for anyone, for everyone is under the control of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, all living beings, and their leaders carry on worship, be well protected. It is He only who brings them together and disperses.
Slow down. Yatha gavo nashi protas tantayam baddhashadamahi vaktantyam nama virbaddha vahanti balim ishituha.
As a cow bound through the nose by a long rope, condition, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme.
Yatha pakkaranam sanyoga vigama iha ichchaya kridi tuhsyatam tathaive sechchaya ninam.
As a player sets up and disperses his playthings according to his own sweet will, so the supreme will of the Lord brings men together and separates them.
Yanmanyase dhruvam lokam adhruvam vanacho bhayam sarvatha nahi sochayaste snehat anyatra mohajat.
O king, in all circumstances, Whether you consider the soul to be an eternal principle, or the material body to be perishable, or everything to exist in an impersonal, absolute truth, or everything to be an inexplicable combination of matter and spirit, feeling of separation, are due only to illusionary affection and nothing more.
Text 45. Tasmajaya angavaiklavyam anjana kritam atmanah katham tva anatah kripana varteranste cha mam vina.
Therefore, give up your anxiety due to, due to ignorance of the self. You are now thinking of how they, who are helpless, poor creatures, will exist without you.
Hare Krishna Mataji, would you like me to continue?
Mataji, let me ask. I'm sorry, so sorry about that, Mataji.
No,
Ishita would. Thank you, Mataji. Ishita, can you hear me now?
Okay, Mataji, I'll continue. I think.
Yeah, Mataji, I think you continue. Thank you so much.
Kala karma gunadhino dehoyam panchabhautikah katham anyam sugopayet sharpagrisat yatha param.
This gross material body, made of 5 elements, is already under control of the eternal time, kala, action, karma, and the mode of nature, material nature, guna. How then can it, being already in the jaws of the serpent, protect others?
Ahashtani sahastanam padani chatuspadam falguni tatra tam jivo jivasya jivana.
These,
Those
those who are devoid of hands, are prey for those who have hands. Those devoid of legs are prey for the four-legged. The weak are the subsistence of the strong, and in general, rule holds that one living being is food for another.
Text 48. Tad idam bhagavan rajan eka atmatmanam swadrik antaro nantaro bhati pashyatam maya yorudha.
Therefore, O king, you should look to the Supreme Lord only, who is one without a second, and who manifests himself by different energies, and is both within and without.
Text 49. Soyam adya maharaja bhagavan bhuta bhavanam kala rupo va tirnosyam abhava suradvisha.
That Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, in the guise of all devouring time, Kala Rupa, has now descended to the earth to eliminate the enviousness.
Nishpaditam deva krityam avashe shesham pratikshate tavad yuyam avekshadvam bhaved yavad iheshwaraha.
The Lord has already performed his duties to help the demigods, and he is awaiting the rest. You Pandavas may wait as long as the Lord is here on the earth.
Dhritarashtra saha bhratra gandharya sach cha swabharyaya dakshinena himavata rishinam ashramam gataha.
O king, your uncle Dhritarashtra, his brother Vidura, and his wife Gandhari have gone to southern side of the Himalaya mountains, where there are shelters of the great sages.
Text 52. Troto bhi saptabhirya vai swardhuni saptadha vyadhat shaptanam pritaye nana shaptashrota prachakshate.
The place is called Saptasrota, divided by 7, because there are waters of the sacred Ganges were divided into 7 branches. This was done for the satisfaction of the 7 great rishis.
Text 53. स्नात्वानुसवनं तस्मिन् भूत्वा चाग्निं यथाविधि अभक्ष्य उपशान्तात्मा स आस्ते विगतैषणः.
On the banks at Sapstrasrota, Dhritarashtra is now engaged in beginning Astanga Yoga by bathing 3 times daily in the morning, noon, and evening by performing the Agnihotra sacrifice with fire and by drinking only water. This helps one control the mind and senses and frees one completely from the thoughts of familial affection.
Text 54. जितासनो जितश्वासः प्रत्यार्थ सद इन्द्रियः भावनाय अष्ट रजः सत्त्व तमो मलः.
One who has controlled the sitting postures, the yoga asanas,
The yogic asanas,
yogic asanas, and the breathing process, in turn, the sense toward the absolute personality of Godhead, to the contamination of the modes of nature, namely mundane goodness, passion, and ignorance.
विज्ञानात्मनि संयोज्य क्षेत्राग्ने प्रविलाप्यतं ब्रह्मणि आत्मनाम् आधारे गताम्बरम् इवम्बरे.
This Dhritarashtra will have to amalgamate his pure identity with intelligence and then merge into the Supreme Being with knowledge of his qualitative oneness as a living entity with a Supreme Brahman. Being freed from the block sky, he will have to rise the spiritual sky.
ध्वस्तमाया गुणोदर्को निरुद्ध करणाशयः निवर्तितखिलाहारा अष्टे स्थाणुरिवाचलः तस्यान्तरायो मैवाभू संन्यास्तखिलकर्मणः.
He will have to suspend all the actions of the senses, even from the outside, and will have to be impervious to interactions of the senses, which are influenced by the modes of material nature. After renouncing all material duties, he must be immovably established beyond all sources of hindrances on the path.
सवा अद्यातनाद्राजन् परत पञ्चमेहन् कलेवरं हास्यति स्वां तच्च भस्मी भविष्यति.
O king, he will quit his body, most probably in the 5th day from today,
It's 20 hours.
and his body will turn to ashes.
Text 58. दयमानेऽग्निभिर्देहे पत्युपत्नी सहोत्तजे बहिः स्थिता पतिं साध्वी तम् अग्निम् अनुवेक्ष्यति.
While outside, observing her husband who will burn in the fire of mystic power along with his thatched cottage, his chaste wife blended the fire with rapt attention.
विदुरास्तु तद् आश्चर्यं निशम्य कुरुनन्दन हर्षशोकयुतस्तस्मात् गन्तातीर्थनिषेवकः.
Vidura, being affected with delight and grief, will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage.
Text 60. इत्य उक्त्वाथारुहात् स्वर्गं नारद सह तुम्बुरुः युधिष्ठिरो वचस्तस्य हृदि कृत्वा जहाच शुचः.
Having spoken thus, The great sage Narada, along with his Veena, ascended into outer space. Yudhishthira kept his instruction in his heart and so was able to get rid of all limitations.
Hare Krishna,
Hare
thank you.
Krishna, thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful recitations. That was nice. Jyoti Mataji, am I co-host now?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, yes, you are. I've just made you one.
Okay.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Great. Thank you. So let me share my screen. It is. Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you for joining. So today we are going to discuss the last three verses of this chapter. Chapter number 13, Dhritarashtra quits home. So let's start. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudire Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Neshtakam Yam Pravrajeta Manupe Tamapeta Krutyam Dvaipayano Virahaka Tara Aju Ava Putreti Tannayatayo Taravo Vinedus Tam Sarvabhuta Hridayam Munimanatosmi. So let's start. 58th verse from 13th chapter of the first canto. Dayyamane patyuh patni sahotaje bahistita patim sadhvi tamagni manuvekshati. So we won't do word by word translation. We will just straight away go to translation and the purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. While outside observing her husband, who will burn in the fire of mystic power, along with his thatched cottage, his chaste wife will enter the fire with rapt attention. Gandhari was an ideal chaste lady, a life companion of her husband, and therefore, when she saw her husband burning in the fire of mystic yoga, along with his cottage of leaves, she despaired. She left home after losing her 100 sons, and in the forest she saw that her most beloved husband was also burning. Now she actually felt alone, and therefore she entered the fire of her husband and followed her husband to death. This entering of a chaste lady into the fire of her dead husband is called sati rite, and the action is considered to be most perfect for a woman. In a later age, this sati rite became an obnoxious criminal affair because the ceremony was forced upon even an unwilling woman. In this fallen age, it is not possible for any lady to follow the sati rite as chastely as it was done by Gandhari and others in past ages. A chaste wife like Gandhari would feel the separation of her husband to be more burning than actual fire. Such a lady can observe the sati rite voluntarily, and therefore there is no criminal force by anyone. When the rite became a formality only, and force was applied upon a lady to follow the principle, actually it became criminal, and therefore the ceremony was to be stopped by state law. This prophecy of Narad Muni to Maharaj Yudhishthir forbade him to go to his widowed aunt. Next one. Vidurastu tadascharya nishamya kurunandana harshashoka yuktastat tasmad gantaha nishevakaha. Vidura, being affected with delight and grief will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage. Vidura was astonished to see the marvelous departure of his brother Dhritarashtra as a liberated yogi, for in his past life he was much attached to materialism. Of course, it was only due to Vidura that his brother attained the desirable goal of life. Vidura was therefore glad to learn about it, but he was sorry that he could not make his brother turn into a pure devotee. This was not done by Vidura because of Dhritarashtra's being inimical to the Pandavas, who were all devotees of the Lord. An offense at the feet of Vaishnava is more dangerous than an offense at the lotus feet of the Lord. Vidura was certainly very liberal to bestow mercy upon his brother Dhritarashtra, whose past life was very materialistic. But ultimately, the result of such mercy certainly depended on the will of the Supreme Lord in the present life. Therefore, Dhritarashtra attained liberation only, and after many such liberated states of life, one can attain to the stage of devotional service. Vidura was certainly very mortified by the death of his brother and sister-in-law, and the only remedy to mitigate such lamentation was to go out to pilgrimage. Thus, Maharaj Yudhishthir had no chance to call back Vidura, his surviving uncle. And we go to the last verse. Ityuktvatharuhat swargam naradah saratum vuruh yudhishthiro vachastasya hridik kritvajjaha chuchaha. Having spoken thus, the great sage Narad, along with his veena, ascended into outer space. Yudhishthir kept his instruction in his heart and so was able to get rid of all lamentations. Purport: Sri Naradji is an eternal spaceman. Having been endowed with a spiritual body by the grace of the Lord, he can travel in the outer spaces of both the material and spiritual worlds without restriction, and can approach any planet in unlimited space within no time. We have already discussed his previous life as the son of a maidservant. Because of his association with pure devotees, he was elevated to the position of an eternal spaceman and thus had freedom of movement. One should therefore try to follow in the footsteps of Narad Muni and not make a futile effort to reach other planets by mechanical means. Maharaj Yudhishthir was a pious king, and therefore he could see Narad Muni occasionally. Occasionally, anyone who desires to see Narad Muni must first be pious and follow in the footsteps of Narad Muni. Thus, end of Bhaktivedanta purports of first canto, 13th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhritarashtra Quits Home. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, let's chant our Mangala Charana and then we will start our discussions. Om Ajnantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuronmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sa Advaitam Sa Avadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Itinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Tarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare जानलंबितभुजौ कनकावधातौ संकीर्तनैकपितरौ कमलायताक्षौ विश्वम्भरौ द्विजभरौ युगधर्मपालौ वन्दे जगत्प्रियकरौ करुणावतारौ यन्तः प्रविश्य मम वाचमिमां प्रसूक्तां सञ्जीवयत्य अखिलशक्तिधरस्वदाम्ना अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणाश्रवणात्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यम् मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरो दीनतारिणं श्रीचैतन्येश्वरं परमानन्दमाधवम्. So we are coming to the end of this chapter, and once again we will go through just the translations. While outside observing her husband, who will burn in the fire of mystic power along with his thatched cottage, his chaste wife will enter the fire with rapt attention. Vidura, being affected with delight and grief, will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage. And then, having spoken thus, the great sage Narad, along with his veena, ascended into outer space. Yudhishthir kept his instruction in his heart and so was able to get rid of all lamentations. So, if we see here in the first verse, Prabhupada talks about the rituals which are followed. There are 16 rituals from before the birth of a child and till the Jivatma leaves the body. According to the different ashram, the type of ritual or the way it is followed, it changes. So before the birth of a child, a lady follows a ritual, a lady and her husband, called Garbhadhana Samskar, and then there are other rituals, 16, we can say, samskaras, Shodasha Samskara it is called as in Sanskrit. So in this particular case, Dhritarashtra was instructed by Vidura, that Mahatma Vidur, that now you should leave home and go to the forest, and that's how Gandhari and Dhritarashtra went to the forest, and this is what the end we are coming to. So as we can see here, that Dhritarashtra was focused on leaving the material bindings aside and moving forward for the attainment of moksha, and he followed the path of yogic life. This was the instruction of Vidura. Now the question will come to our mind is, if Vidura is Yamraj, who is a pure devotee, who is a Mahajan, then why he asked Dhritarashtra to follow this path, not the pure devotion? And the answer is very simple. Because Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, specifically Dhritarashtra, he had committed so many blunders in his previous life. To burn those reactions was the first step he had to follow, and for that he had to follow the austerities. Second thing, he was not only the materially blind, he was spiritually blind as well. So theoretically as well, it was difficult for him to understand the ultimate goal of life, of bhakti. So in a certain stages he had to be instructed, and that is why Mahatma Vidur has given him the instruction Now you go to the forest and start following the yogic process, and that's how the thatched roof and which was made by him. He was a very powerful man. He was very intelligent as well, but at the same time, the the whole intellect was very materially contaminated. So we can see all the machinations he did to kill the Pandavas, to keep them away from the throne of Hastinapur. It was all Dhritarashtra who was actually either supporting or planning something similar to that. So when after 12 years of being in the forest and 1 year of incognito in the kingdom of Maharaj Virat, when Yudhishthir Maharaj went back to Hastinapur, um, and that time Dhritarashtra says to him that now anyway you have, means when they said that now our all promises we have fulfilled, now we are back, so give us 5 villages. We know the story about that. And that time Dhritarashtra says in Mahabharata that now for 13 years you were out of the out of the kingdom, you were in the forest, so now you are used to it and you should stay like that. So what he was saying basically is, now you just don't worry about this opulences of the kingdom. You don't need this throne. You just go and live in the forest, and that's how he's suggesting them. And this is just one example. Even after committing so many mistakes and so many blunders, even towards the end, he is still not convinced that now they are the legitimate heirs of the kingdom of Hastinapur. And for that, then Vidura is giving him, he's very lenient actually. He's giving him the advice that he should go towards towards north. So what we can learn from here is, if we listen to the great personalities, to the Mahajans, to the Acharyas, even if it's sometimes a bit bitter, and even if we don't agree with it, but because their intentions are always pure, intentions are always correct, it is ultimately beneficial to us. So example is, if in a lecture, if our spiritual master or Prabhupada is telling certain instructions, and we may not, because of our spiritual impurities, or material impurities and spiritual immaturity, sometimes we may think that no, this instruction is not suitable for me, or this instruction I'm not going to follow. What advice this purport and this incident is telling us, that we should follow the instructions of the Mahajans and we should follow their footsteps. So the verse from Mahabharata, which is there in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, is here. Tarko pratishtha shruyato vibhinna nasav rishiriyasya matam na bhinnam dharmasya tattvam nihitam guhayam mahajano yena gatastatantaha. So it's a very famous verse. I'm sure all of you know this. Let's read that. Who would like to read the translation? Because otherwise I will be talking continuously. I would like to hear someone else's voice as well.
I can read, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji, of course. Please.
Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, dry arguments are inconclusive. A great personality whose opinions does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Consequently, as the Sastras confirm, one should accept whatever progressive path the Mahajans advocate.
Yes, thank you. So, what uh, this translation itself is very, very powerful. So, let's analyze little bit for our own purification. Um, what Mahaprabhu is telling here is religious principles are understood when we follow the footsteps of the Mahajan, of the great personalities, um, and what they advocate. So, Acharya, what is the meaning of Acharya? Acharya means the Acharati that means the person who follows what he speaks. He is not hypocrite. So, and that person is what he preaches, that's what he follows. Of course, we are talking in a positive sense here, but that person is Acharya. And Mahajans are all Acharyas. So if we take any example of Mahajan, Narad Muni is a Mahajan, Hanuman is a Mahajan, Janak Maharaj is a Mahajan, Lord Brahma is a Mahajan, Lord Shiva is a Mahajan. If we see there, Bali Maharaj is a Mahajan, Prahlad Maharaj is a Mahajan. If we observe their behavior in the Shastras, whatever they spoke, that's what they followed. There was no deviation. They were truthful, they were devoted to the principles, to the dharma, and ultimately to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's what this verse is telling us. Where else it is given to us about the Mahajan? So let's go through other two purports and we will come back to this point here. So let's go to the next verse here. Vidura, being affected with delight and grief, will then leave that place of sacred pilgrimage. Here, as continuation of the earlier discussion, Vidura was certainly very liberal to bestow mercy upon his brother Dhritarashtra. So Vidura is not doing that because he is a brother. Dhritarashtra is his elder brother. Vidura is a Mahajan. He can see everyone with equal vision because he is Yamaraj himself. And he is merciful to Dhritarashtra. And he is telling, as we have seen in the earlier verses, his language is very stern. He says that, don't live like a dog. No, find your own, be self-realized. And that's where Vidura is very, we can see Yamraj ultimately. He's Mahajan and he's very merciful here. Very liberal to bestow mercy upon his brother Dhritarashtra, whose past life was very materialistic, very sinful. But ultimately, the result of such mercy certainly dependent on the will of the Supreme Lord in the present life. So, the question will come to our mind is, even if he was so sinful, he was so materialistic, why he received that mercy? From the Supreme Lord, that of the liberation. Therefore, Dhritarashtra attained liberation only. Yeah. But this is also a great thing. He received the mukti. So that means he came out of these clutches of material miseries, and after many such liberated states of life, that means in the next birth or later on, he will have a life of a devotee, of a pious life, and then when he will come to the stage of devotional service, he will have that ultimate liberation of the pure devotional service. And here Vidura is saying, Vidura was certainly very mortified by the death of his brother and sister-in-law. And the only remedy to mitigate such lamentation was to go out to pilgrimage. So here Vidura is taking shelter of the Supreme Lord again and again and again. He came from the pilgrimage and he is going back to the pilgrimage. Now, Dhritarashtra, here, the verse we have discussed earlier is Tyaktva sadharma charanambujam harer bhajanna pakvota patet tato yadi yatrakko vabhatram abhud amushyakim kovartha apto bhajatam swadharmataha. So let's go through the what that verse means. Tyaktva swadharma charanambujam harer. Just by following the prescribed duties and not following the devotional service, that doesn't give anything. And that's the verse spoken by Narad Muni himself. We have seen this verse earlier. The person who, instead of following just prescribed duties, even if he is little bit less in his day-to-day routine duties, but he is following the path of devotion, Tyaktva swadharma charana ambuja hare, the Lord's lotus feet. If somebody is going to surrender to that, bhajanna pakvotha patet tato yadhi, and still his bhajan, his worship, his devotion is immatured. Bhajanna pakvotha, apakvotha means it's immatured. Patet tato yadhi, and he falls down little bit from the path. Still, that's okay. That is still very great. That's a great credibility of that Jivatma. That's what Narad Muni is saying. Yatrakko abhadram abhud amushyakim. If anybody follows his duties very perfectly, for example, if somebody is very intelligent, if somebody is a CEO of some big company, and if that person is following his duties very impeccably, but when the power is gone, when the chair of the CEO, if the person when he or she has to vacate, as we know, it happens over the time when the person gets old, they have to vacate the chair, and that time all power is gone. Their whole honor, their prestige, all the opulences or the affluence they receive, that is all gone. But here in case of bhakti, the qualification here is Dhritarashtra followed the advice of a pure devotee, and that made him qualified for the liberation. Lord awarded the liberation to Dhritarashtra and Gandhari because they followed the advice of or instructions of a pure devotee, Vidura. And as we can see in case of Dhruva Maharaj, he followed tremendous austerities, and at the end Lord appeared, and we know the story. Does it mean that the austerities of Dhruva Maharaj was the qualification for Lord to appear? Absolutely not. The qualification was the instruction of the Narad Muni, receptivity, the acceptance by Dhruva Maharaj. And then, because the pure devotee of the Lord, Narad Muni has instructed that if you follow austerities and if you follow Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya and if you chant this mantra and so on, then you will see the Lord. To fulfill the promise given by the pure devotee of the Lord, who is Narad Muni, that is why Lord appeared in front of Dhruva Maharaj. Obviously, Dhruva Maharaj, because of those austerities, because he followed the instruction of his spiritual master Narad Muni, he was purified in that process, and then the Lord appeared. So in a similar fashion, Vidura gave the instructions, Dhritarashtra accepted it, and that's the reason he received this liberation, the benediction from the Supreme Lord. So that's what something to learn. And the same in the continuation of our what we were discussing in the previous verse. we should follow the instructions of the great personalities of Vidura. And in our case, we are following the instructions of Prabhupada and our acharyas, and ultimately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Um, and then obviously the mercy will be bestowed upon us in the form of devotional service. So let's go to the next verse. Um, so Narad Muni has given what narrated what has happened or what's going to happen to Yudhishthir Maharaj, and then Narad Muni, as Prabhupada says, he's an eternal spaceman. He has the spiritual body by the grace of the Lord, and he can travel anywhere in material and in spiritual worlds. And throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, we will come to know the Narad Muni's participation in the Leelas of the Lord. So Narad Muni, as we can see here, again the same principle is continued because of his association with pure devotees. Of course, that is again the Leela. In the next cycle as well, Narad Muni will appear as the son of maid servant, and he will go through that. But the point here is, because of his association with pure devotees and he accepted their instructions, he was elevated to the position of eternal spaceman and thus had a freedom of movement. One should therefore try to follow the footsteps of Narad Muni, and as we saw the verse Mahajano Yenagatasthapanta, and not make futile effort to reach other planets by mechanical means. I don't have to talk about this in detail, but we know nowadays some space agencies or some people are advertising that we will take you to Mars, we will take you to somewhere else, and you can have your colony and your family and so on and so forth. And definitely that is not a sensible approach, and that's not a good plan for the people on the earth. Maharaj Yudhishthir was a pious king, and here we can see again that Maharaj Yudhishthir is accepting the instruction or the suggestion by Mahajan Narad Muni, and therefore he could see Narad Muni occasionally. We can see that later on as well. Maharaj Yudhishthir gets instructions from Narad Muni in the 7th canto as well. And that's a very fascinating story. We won't discuss that now. But then here, anyone who desires to see Narad Muni must first be pious and follow the footsteps of Narad Muni. And that's what Maharaj Yudhishthir has accepted, the instructions or the suggestions of Narad Muni. So that's what this is the last verse we talked about. Now here, what comes is, if we go to the nectar of instruction, and that's what something it came to my mind that we can remember what are all the instructions given by our acharyas, because as all the 3 verses we saw, following the footsteps of Acharya and following the footsteps of, or the instructions of the superiors, of the Acharyas, of the great personalities, we should be doing that. And this is the direct instruction from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu coming to us via Rupa Goswami through the words of Rupa Goswami. So first one, we will go through one by one. We will just read the verses, maybe first 4, and you all can read rest of the verses later on. So we will go through the first one. Vacho vegam manasaha krodha vegam jivva vegam udaro apastha vegam etan vegan yo vishaheta dhiraha sarvam apimam prithivim sashishyat. So, purport is quite long. It's an it's a amazing purports given by Prabhupada. Who would like to read the translation?
I can read, Prabhuji.
Yes,
Hare
sir.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, please do.
A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. So this verse is telling us that it's a propensity everyone has that I should be popular. Somebody should be, if not anyone else, at least my small child should follow me. But to have that qualification, this is what Rupa Goswami is telling us, or implicitly Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is telling us. We need to tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, manasaha, the actions of anger and the urges of the tongue, belly and genitals. So 6 urges we are supposed to follow. We are supposed to control, and then that will make that will develop our personality at the refined level, and it will be conducive for the path of bhakti, for the devotional service. So it's a very long purport. All purports of Nectar of Instructions are quite long and very, very powerful. There is lot to catch in those. There is lot to learn in those purports. So the next verse is Atyaharaha prayasascha prajalpo niyamagraha janasangascha laulyascha shadbhir bhaktir vinashyati. Yeah, once more, Mataji, you can read the translation.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, can I read it?
Of course you can. Yeah.
Okay. One's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. First one, eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. Number 2, over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. Number 3, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matter. Number 4, practicing the scriptural rules and regulation only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of the scriptures and working independently or whimsically. Number 5, associating with worldly minded people who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. And number 6, being greedy for mundane achievements. Hare Krishna
Thank
Prabhu.
you very much. Thank you, Mataji. So, all the 6 urges which are against the path of bhakti, and we can see all the 6 urges Dhritarashtra had. I'm not talking about his eating, but necessarily or collecting more funds than required. He was quite greedy to he wanted to be the king, though he was not qualified. Over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain, and we can see that in his case, he was endeavoring for a lot of things to give the kingdom to his children. He was attached to his relatives, and Shakuni was giving advice. So he had a wrong association, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, and we can see that instead of talking devotional service, Dhritarashtra was talking everything for the material enjoyment, though he was not qualified. So practicing the scriptural rules, he must be following certain rituals, but as Mahabharata says, but he was doing that just for the material advancement and not for any spiritual advancement. And that's what the fourth rule is. Fifth, associating, as we saw, associating with Shakuni, with his son Duryodhan, and all other worldly minded people. He was not interested in devotional service or Krishna consciousness, and being greedy for mundane achievements, as we know his character properly. So that's what the second verse says. Now we will come to the point where it is a positive verse. It talks about success in the path of bhakti. So उत्साह निश्चयात् धैर्यात् तत्तत् कर्म प्रवर्तनात् संगत त्यागात् सतो वृत्तेः षड्भिर् भक्तिर् प्रसिद्ध्यति. So who is going to read this?
May I read?
Of course you can. Please do.
There are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. 1. Being enthusiastic. 2. Endeavoring with confidence. 3. Being patient. 4. Acting according to regulative principles, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. 5. Abandoning the association of non-devotees. And 6. Following in the footsteps of previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. So, opposite of Dhritarashtra is Vidura here, and Bhishmadev. Or we can if we analyze the personality of a devotee, we can see that here. Being enthusiastic. So, Vidura was always enthusiastic to serve the Lord. He was always happy to see the Lord, to hear about the Lord, endeavoring with confidence. Even if he was a son of a Shudrani, maid servant, still in his devotional service, in his path of bhakti, his all endeavors were, he was very confident that yes, Lord will protect me. I am doing it as a service to the Lord. He was always patient. His whole personality is that he was a dhira. He was always patient. Acting according to regulative principles such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. So he's, as we can see here, that Vidura's personality is always acting according to regulative principles. He never went beyond any regulative principles. He always followed that, and that's the reason he always spoke the truth. He was a well-wisher of everyone, and that the reason is his purity. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna all the time. That's his greatness. Abandoning the association of non-devotees. When time came that he had to take side of someone, and as a matter of principle, he did not want to take side of Kauravas, so he just abandoned the association of non-devotees and he went for a pilgrimage. But being a well-wisher, as we know, he always saved Pandavas from all the dangers, him and Bhishmadev, and following the footsteps of previous acharyas. So he was always respectful to all the acharyas, to all the sages, all the devotees, and and as we know, it will come later, that he took the instructions from Maitreya Rishi. So he was following the footsteps and the suggestions or the instructions from the devotees. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service, and that's what we can see very properly, vividly in case of Mahatma Vidur. Let's go to the next verse. And Dadati pratigrahanati guhyam akhyati pruchhati bhunte bhojayate chaiva shadvidham priti lakshanam. So again, it's all set of 6 It's a small translation. Who would like to read, please?
I can read, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji, please do.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Offering gifts in charity, accepting charitable gifts, revealing one's mind in confidence, inquiring confidentially, accepting prasada, and offering prasada are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So, gifts here, this is the 6 loving exchanges. His Grace Gaurang Prabhu, he loves this verse. You will hear very detailed explanation with lot of case studies on this verse by His Grace Gaurang Prabhu. So offering gifts in charity, um, offering the whatever any person has, um, it's not the material what matters. It's the generosity. It's the heart of full with love. That's what we give. For example, when a sannyasi gives a prasad to somebody, it is incredibly uh, wonderful. It's amazing when we receive the sweet or prasad from a sannyasi. That charity, because it is with that purity, it comes with love. So when we give something to the great personality, to sannyasi, in our heart we can feel that joy, that yes, now the money I have, or something I have earned, I have given it to some great personality. That's the exchange of love, and there is a purification in our heart of what we earn and overall our heart. So that's the reason of offering gifts in charity, accepting the gifts not with any judgment, but as a gesture of love from others. That's the reason accepting charitable gifts, given with that love, revealing one's mind in confidence, sharing our thoughts with someone whom you confide, who is a wonderful devotee, uh, whom you think you're quite close to. So that's very important. And then that devotee also shares their mind with you, and these are the another 2 loving exchanges. So total 4, and the last 2 are accepting prasad and offering prasad. I think we can anyone can start with this, and then slowly get purified to follow all the 6 loving exchanges and all the Utsaha, Nishchaya, Dhairyat, all other 6 qualities we saw earlier. So offering prasad and accepting prasad, very wonderful gesture, because finally that's the most important thing we get attracted to when we come to the devotional service. And as Srila Rupa Goswami says, are the 6 symptoms of love shared by one devotee and another. This is again, then it comes even further. Krishned yasya giridam manasadriyet dikshad chet praniti bhishcha bhajantamisham shushrushaya bhajanta vidnya mananya ananya ninda dishunya rudimipsita labd sangalabdhya. That's a very long verse, and here the instruction is even, it goes further about to progress on the spiritual path, how to why one should undergo the process of spiritual of diksha, spiritual initiation, and worshipping the deity, and then it goes further. But first 4 verses is a good start for the devotee to meditate on, and that's what I think. There are some interesting points to discuss, but I don't think we have time for that. exchanges between husband and wife is given in the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. If it's quite fascinating. You can read that in your own free time. So that's where we will stop. Are there any questions or comments or any additions anyone would like to have? No questions and no comments? No additions? If not, then we will stop here, and next week sometime we may meet again virtually. So thank you everybody. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu
Thank you, Prabhuji. Namo, namo. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank
For
you,
a wonderful
Prabhu.
class. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.